Hi my friends, welcome to another exciting one. Today we are modeling a juice bottle from scratch. We're going to do the modeling, the texturing, lighting and rendering, and then we will do a little bit of fluid simulation to bring up this milk splash that you see at the back of our juice bottle. Without much talks, open up your blender and let's get started. So as usual and always, we are going to start from scratch. We are going to do everything ourselves, step by step. So if you follow along, by the end, you should get the results that I'm going to get as well. So let's open up our Blender. I'm using Blender 4.20, which is the latest version of Blender. So let's go to General to start with a fresh scene. So first, we are going to add our reference image. So to do that, let's select the light and then the cube, and then we hit on X to delete it from our scene. Next, let's go to our X right to graphic view. So I'll hit on X to go to my right orthographic view. And then we do Shift A. We go to our empty. We go to our image and then add in a reference. Right. So I'll quickly rotate to my reference. It's going to be added to the link in the description below if you want to follow along. So I'll select my reference image. I'll add it into my scene like this. So I'll quickly zoom in, and then this is what we have. So we are just roughly going to model the shape, the reference, model the shape of the reference as close as possible. So few things to do. Let's lock our reference in place. So we are going to go here, make sure we turn this on, and then let's click on it to lock our reference in place so that we will not be able to move our reference accidentally. So after we have our reference in place, let's start with the modeling. So first we do Shift A and then let's add in a cylinder. Right, we are going to toggle this up, leave the vertices at 32, that's fine, and then let's decrease the radius a bit until it's almost identical to our reference image. Next, let's decrease the depth a bit. We are going to start small and then we move our way upwards. Right, so once we have our desired shape, next let's hit on GZ to bring it down to somewhere here. Now with this shape active, let's tab into edit mode, and then let's make sure we have our edge select mode active. Alt click to select this entire edge here, and then as usual, you know what follows, a little bit of extrusion here and there to finish up our form. This is very simple one, so I hope you have no problem with it. So we hit on E to extrude it up on the Z axis to somewhere here. Always try to make sure you have your X active so that you can see the profile very clearly. Right, if you want, you can hit on your wireframe mode or hold Shift Z to turn on your wireframe mode so that you can see everything very clearly. So I'll do E, bring it to somewhere here, and then we scale it down a little bit. E, bring it up. S to scale it down, and then we do the same thing until everything is filled up. So E, S, and then E once again, S to scale it down to somewhere here, and then finally we do E to extrude it out until we have something like this. Right, so once we are done, we go to our solid shading mode. This is what we have. Right, so lastly I will go to my wireframe mode again on my X, and then let's add in a loop cut right in the middle like this. So we do Ctrl+R to add in a loop cut here. We are trying to create this bump here, so let's do Ctrl+P to bevel that loop cut until we have a shape like this. GZ to bring it down a little bit to something like this. So once we have this, we can do, let's go back to our solid shading mode, click on it like this, and then we can do Alt+E, extrude faces along normals, and then let's extrude it out so we have something like this. So once we have this, you can select, go to our face select mode, select this face, hit on X to delete the face from the scene, and then make sure we go back to our edge select mode, Alt click to select this entire loop here, and then let's add in some bevel by holding Ctrl+P. For bevel, let's scroll our mouse wheel to add in a little bit of curviness like this, looking nice. Next, let's make sure we have our face select mode active again. Select this face, I to extrude, insert, E to bring it up, I, let's try it once again, and then G to bring it up a little bit like this. Let's extrude it one more time. So I'll extrude, and then G to bring it up a little bit like this, and then I to extrude it one more time, and then maybe bring it down a little bit like this, so that we have something like this going on for us. So that's it. We can hide our empty for now. We don't need it anymore. So let's click on here, then here to hide it from our scene. So that's it, as simple as that for our bottle jar. Looking nice. Let's add in some subdivision surface so that we see what we have. So to add our subdivision, we can do Ctrl+2 to add in 2 levels of subdivision, or we go to our modifiers tab, add modifier, generate, and then we locate our subdivision surface and then add 2 layers of subdivision. So this is what we have, looking nice and beautiful. Next, let's shade it smooth. So right click, then shade smooth, so that we have this nice smooth transition going on for us. So next, let's add in some thickness. To do that, we select everything in our scene, and then we do Alt+E, and then we extrude faces along normal, and then we extrude it inside like this. So for us to be able to see how much thickness we have, we can turn off our subdivision surface for now inside our editing mode by clicking on this. So our subdivision will not be shown when we are inside our editing mode. So this is what we have. If we still have this active, we can scroll back a little bit to decrease the thickness a bit, so that we have something like this. So if we tab out of edit mode, we'll be able to see how our subdivision and everything is looking. So let's tighten up this corner a little bit. So let's go back into edit mode, Control R. I'll add one loop cut right here, Control B to bevel, scroll my mouse wheel to remove some of the loop cuts so that we have one at the top and then one at the bottom. I'll do the same thing inside, Control R, Control B, I'll bevel, and then I have one loop cut at the top and then one at the bottom. So now if you go out of edit mode, this is what we have, nice sharp rounded edges like that. So we are done. Let's focus on creating our cap. That one is going to be simple. So let's make sure we have our edge select mode active. Alt click to select this entire loop, and then we do a Shift+D to create a duplicate, and P, and then we separate it by selection to create a different object altogether. Now if we tab out of edit mode, we have 2 objects created. Let's quickly rename them before we get confused. So I'll select this, which is our main bottle, and then I'll name it as bottle, and then this will be the cap. So double click and then we name it as cap. Right, so we have the cap and then the bottle. Nice and simple. So let's select our cap, and then let's tab into edit mode, alt click to select the entire thing, and then let's go to our X like this, and then G Z to bring it up to somewhere here. Then we can extrude it up, so by holding on E for extrusion, and then Z to lock it to the Z axis like this, right? And then we add in some loop cuts, some extrusion again. So E, extrude, S to scale, right? And then we can bring it up by hitting on G and Z to bring it up a little. E, S to extrude it. G, Z to bring it up a little. E, S to extrude. And then F to fill it up, and then G to maybe bring it down a little to create a little bit of detail. Now if we tap out of edit mode, this is what we have. Right, it's looking nice. Let's right click and then shade it smooth. Now we have this smooth thing going on. Maybe we can do a little bit work by tightening up the top part a little. So I'll tab into edit mode, Control R, create a loop cut, and then tighten it up a little like this. So once we add this loop cut, let's jump out of edit mode to see what we have. So I'll hit on tab to go out of edit mode, and then this is what we have. It's looking better now, I think. So let's tab into edit mode once again, and then let's add in a little bit of thickness to this one. So I'll hit on A to select everything. I'll hit on my slash key to isolate this, and then we can do Alt E, extrude along normals to extrude to add in a little bit of thickness right like this. Let's tab out of edit mode, and this is what we have. Maybe we can add Control R, add a loop cut right here, Control R, add another one inside like this so that it holds our form a little bit like this. So let's tab out of edit mode, and then this is what we have for now. I think it's looking nice and beautiful. Next, let's see how we can create our content inside. So the milk, which is inside our milk jar. So to do that, we are going to borrow a geometry from the main milk jar. So we select it, and then we do Shift plus D to create a duplicate. Right click to keep it in place. So we have our duplicate in place. So if you check at our outliner, we have bottle 1 and then bottle 2. So let's select the second bottle, double click, and then let's rename it to milk. Right, this is going to be our milk. So it's going to be our content inside the bottle. Right, let's tab into edit mode and then see what we have. Right, so we have our milk selected. Then we are in edit mode. We can isolate it to see what we have. So we want our milk to be right about somewhere here, or somewhere here is fine. So first, let's go to our face select mode, alt click to select this entire loop here, and then we can hit on X to delete faces. Right, so whilst we delete this face, we've separated these two objects here. So if I bring my mouse here and I hit on L to select linked, it's not going to select here. And then if I do the same thing here, it's going to select this entire thing without selecting the part at the top. So I'll bring my mouse wheel here, click on L to select this entire object, X to delete it. So I'll delete the faces so that everything will be deleted, left with only this part. So this part is going to be our inner content, which will be the milk. So let's fill it up quickly. So let's go to our edge select mode, alt click to select this entire loop here, E for extrusion, and then S to scale. Then maybe we'll bring it a little bit down. So GZ to bring it down, something like this. And then ES to scale, maybe GZ to bring it a little bit down, ES to scale it one more time. And then we hit on F to fill this hole, right? So once we tab out of edit mode, this is what we have. Let's add in one loop cut right at somewhere here to tighten up this place a little bit so that we have something like this. Nice. So let's add in a couple of loop cuts just in the middle to balance the geometry a little bit. So I'll do Control R, scroll my mouse wheel, add a loop cut, Control R, scroll my mouse wheel, and then add a couple of loop cuts, right? Just at the middle to make everything look nice. So now if we go back to our edit, hit on slash, we have something like this. So we have the main bottle and then we have the milk, right? So let's kill our milk a little bit inside so that it looks like it's inside our main bottle. As right now, you can see they are conflicting with each other. So let's select our milk, tab into edit mode, A to select everything, and then we can do Shift Z to go into our wireframe mode, or we can just click here to go back into our wireframe mode. So once we are in our wireframe mode, let's make sure we have our right orthographic view by clicking on this X here, and then we can do Alt plus S to shrink it down. So we shrink it down until it's right in between the two walls of our main bottle container like this, right? So we have something like this. Alt F to shrink it down till you have something like this, right? It's right in between the middle of our container like that. So tab out of edit mode, go back to our solid shading mode, and then we have something like this, nice and simple. So lastly, before we remove our hands from our bottle, let's add in our label, and that will be the last. So let's select our main bottle, tab into edit mode, and then let's add a couple of subdivision at the middle. So I'll do Control plus R, scroll my mouse wheel up a couple of times, so 3 times to have this nice 3 cuts. I'll do the same at the bottom, Control R, scroll my mouse wheel up, and then create loop cuts at the bottom as well, so that everything is nice and balanced, right? So now let's create our label. So to create our label, let's make sure we have our bottle selected, tab into edit mode, and then we want to start our label from somewhere here. So let me alt click from here to here, so somewhere from here to here, right? So we're going to select this entire faces, duplicate it, and then use it to create our label. So first, let's go to our wireframe mode so that we have the wireframe active. Let's hit on X to go to our X orthographic view. To go to our right orthographic view, then let's make sure we have our face select mode active. And let's drag from here to here so we have this entire place selected. We can just quickly check by turning on our reference image. Yeah, so we want to start from here and then end here. So once we have it selected, let's turn off our reference image, go back to our shape, let's go back to our solid shading view. And then with this, we can do Shift plus D to create a duplicate, and then hit on P, and then we can separate it by selection. So let's move out of the edit mode back into the object mode. Now we have a duplicate here. So let's just double click on it and then rename it as label. So we're going to apply our label to this later. So once we have this selected, let's make sure our label is not intersecting with the bottle. So let's increase the size of the label a little bit. So first, let's make sure we have this set at the center of our label nicely. So this small yellow dot here set at the center of our label. That's the point of origin. So let's go to our object, and then we can go to our set origin to geometry to bring the origin point right in the middle of the geometry. And then we can do S for scale, hold Shift to scale it in small increment. And then we can drag out a little bit like this, so that is a little outside. It's a little bit bigger than our main bottle, like this. Nice and simple. So next, let's UV unwrap this. Since we have our bottle, our cap, and then our milk, and then our label. So next, let's try and add in some materials, and then let's first UV unwrap this, and then let's see how we can add in our label, our materials, our lighting, and then maybe finally we can do the fluid simulation to tie everything up and make everything nice and neat. So let's select the label, and then let's go to our UV editing tab, and then let's see how we can unwrap this. Right. So first, make sure I have we are here. We have our solid mode active like this. Now let's see how we can unwrap this to create our UV. Right. So let's come to the back like this. Then let's look for a straight line that goes from top to bottom. So I think we will do with this one. Let's make sure we have an edge mode active. Click here, hold Control to click here to select this entire edge like this. And then we can hit on U, and then we can go to mark seam to mark it as seam. So once we are done, we can hit on A to select everything. And then we can hit on U, and then we can go on wrap to unwrap everything nicely like this. So once everything is unwrapped, we can hit on A to select this one part here, hit on L to select this linked island, and then we can hit on S to scale it down, and then bring it down somewhere here. Right. Next, we can select any of this, hit on L to select everything, and then we can rotate it 90 degrees, minus 90 degrees like this. Then G to position it in place nicely. Then maybe we can scale it up a little bit like this. So we have one little problem, which is our UV is a bit crooked. It's not straight. So let's try and see how we can straighten it up. So to straighten it up, let's just find one face like this, which has a straight edges, and then we use that face, and we're going to use this command follow active quads to use this face as a guide to straighten the rest of the UV up. So to make sure we have a face with a straight edge, we have to straighten up the edge manually. So first, let's make sure we have our point select mode active by hitting on 1, and then we select these 2 points, here, this one, and then this one, and then let's scale it on the Y axis. So we hit on S, Y, and then we hit on 0, and then we do the same thing here, S, Y, 0. Then we can do the same thing here, but instead of Y axis, we are going to do X axis. So S, X, we hit on 0, and then SX, we hit on 0, and then at this point, this is perfectly straightened up quads. So we just have to go to our face select mode by hitting on 3, make sure this face is active, and then we can hit on A to select the entire thing with this face active, the one we just straighten up. Then we can right click and then we can do follow active quads, right? So once we do that, you can see everything is now straightened up nice and perfectly. So G, and then I can position it in place to somewhere here. Then maybe we can do S to scale it out a little bit like this. So once we have this, there's a little trick I would like to share with you. So usually I'll first UV unwrap it before I go on and design my label. In that case, I'll be able to have label which is proportionally correct to the label that will be applied inside my blender. So the way I get this UV is I'll go to my UV and then I'll go to export UV layout. So once I click on export, I'll just locate where I want to save it. Then I'll export my UV layout, and then once I'm designing my label. So this is my label, the one that we are going to use in this project. It's a very simple one. I'll just export the UV, and then I'm going to use it as the dimension of my label, so that once I export it back into Blender, everything fits nice and beautiful, right? So that's what I usually do. And by the way, I usually import my labels as PSDs, so that if I want to make some edits whilst I'm still designing, I can easily make edits, save it, and then once I go back into my Blender, I can just come here, come to my images, and then I can just hit on reload to reload the new saved image. As simple as that. I hope you've learned something. Let's continue. So once we have this UV unwrap, we can now go back into our layout, and then let's try and then add in some materials, right? So I'll drag and bring this up here. Then first let's set up a simple HDRI we are going to use. So before we go ahead, make sure all your UVs, all your normals are facing the right way, because it might turn out that all of these normals are red. So first make sure they are facing the right way. So to be able to check your normals, you have to come here and then go to face orientation, and then make sure everything is blue. If it isn't, so let's say for example yours might be red, so I'll do Alt N, and then I will flip. Yours might be red like this. The way to fix it is just tab into edit mode, make sure everything is selected by hitting on A, and then hit on Shift plus N to recalculate the normal. So make sure everything is blue nicely. Check inside and make sure it's blue as well, so that everything is nice and your material will be applied nicely as well. So let's go back. Let's turn this off here, and then let's change this to our shader editor. Then let's go to our world. Make sure we have our world selected, and then let's add in an HDRI into our world to create our light. So I'll select the background and then hit on Control plus T, and then it will hook in environment texture mapping, and then these three nodes here into our color. If yours doesn't work, maybe you don't have your HDRI, you don't have your node wrangler active, so go to your preference, add-ons, and then make sure you have your node wrangler checked active. Once you have that, it should work. So Control plus T, select this, and then hit on Control plus T to bring your environment texture mapping and then texture coordinates. So once we have this, let's plug in an HDRI. So let's hit on open. Make sure we locate where we save our HDRI. So mine is somewhere here. Just Google free HDRI. You'll be able to get some free options to use. So just plug in any of them. It doesn't really matter. So I'll double click. So our HDRI is added into our scene. So quickly, let's go to our render. Now let's change our render engine to cycles. Make sure we have our GPU compute turned on, and then you can decrease the max sample depending on the power of your PC. I'm currently using a laptop and it's capable enough to push this, but if yours doesn't, just decrease it. Then let's go back, and then let's make sure we have this turned on like this, right? So that we have some light into our scene. So once we are here, let's go to our render settings, film, and then let's make it transparent by checking on transparent. So our HDRI is in our scene, but then it's transparent and hidden from our scene. So that's it, nice and simple. Next, let's go back to our object. and then let's start applying materials to our object. So first we'll start from the top and then we move our way down, since the top one is the easiest. So once we have the cap selected, let's hit on new to create a new material. Let's change the color to something like this, make it a little bit darker, and then let's decrease the roughness and let's bring it down a bit like this. Nice. Next, let's add in our glass material. So we select the glass and then we hit on new. Let's remove this from the socket, select this and then hit on X to delete it from our scene. So next, let's do Shift A. Now let's search for glass BSDF shader. Then let's just plug in the glass into our surface like this. It's looking nice and beautiful. That's right about it. It works. And then let's leave it right there. It's looking nice. So next, let's focus on the label. Now let's see how we can apply our label that we created. It's going to be in the description below if you want to download the project file to follow along. So I'll select my label. Now hit on new to create a new principal BSDF. Make sure our principal BSDF is selected. Then we hit on Ctrl+T. Then we to add in an image tester which is mapped already to our UV. So once we have this selected, we hit on open. Then we are going to double click to open our label. Nice, like this. Right, so our label will be opened nice and beautiful like this. So we want the black part to be transparent, right? So that we can see through our sweet, nice, beautiful milk. So how are we going to do that? We are going to plug the alpha into the alpha channel like this. And then there we go. It's looking nice and beautiful so far. Let's fix the UV a little bit to make sure everything is nicely proportioned. So let's go to our UV editing tab. Then let's make sure we have our look dev mode active so that we can see what's going on. Now let's go to our editing render tab. So I have something like this. And then we can hit on A to select everything. So now I just have to make sure I have my label selected. A to select everything, and then let's scale so that everything is nicely. So I've scaled it on the Y axis. Hit on G to position everything nicely in place. G to bring everything down. Then S to scale it out. G to bring everything down like this. I think everything is looking nice and beautiful. The UV is applied nicely and seamlessly like this. Right. So now let's go back to our layout and see what we have. So far so good. We are done with our materials. Let's see how we can add in our fluid simulation, and then we can add in our light material and then do our final render. So once we have this, we can quickly save our file, our progress, do Ctrl+S, and then save your progress so that you don't lose your progress so far. So next, let's drag and bring this down since we are done. And let's go back into our solid shading mode for now. Now to the difficult part. Let's see how we can create that splash at the back of our model. Right, so let's see how we can create that splash at the back of our model. We are going to need three things to be able to do that. First, we need a domain. So let's first create a domain. So we can do Shift+A, and then let's create a cube. Right, so this cube, let's scale it out a little bit, make it a little bit bigger like this. And then we can do Ctrl+A to apply our scale. So this cube is going to be the domain. So let's name it as domain. And then let's go to our object properties, and then let's go to our viewport display. Let's change it to bounds for now. So this is going to be our domain. I think it's a little bit small. Let me just scale it out a little bit. Ctrl+A to apply my scale. Next, we need a flow. So where the fluid is going to flow from. So we are going to use a plane for the flow. So let's do Ctrl+A, mesh, and then let's add in a plane. Let's scale it down a little bit. Then GZ to bring it back to somewhere here. Right. So once we have this, we can rotate it on the Y axis, R, y 90. So we rotate it 90 degrees on the y-axis so that it's facing our bottle like this, right? So let's double click it here and then rename it to flow. The renaming doesn't really matter. You can rename it to anything you want, but just for us to be on the same page and then just for us not to get confused. That's why we have our domain, our flow, and then the last thing we need is an effector. So we want the fluid to come from this flow here. So flow, and then it will be affected by this so that it will create a splash around it, right? But we could have used this bottle. We could have used this bottle as the effector, but this bottle has a hole inside, and then with my experience, Blender tends to have issues with effectors that have hole inside. So once we create this thing, we create the fluid, you can see that the fluid will be passing through the bottle, which is not supposed to happen. So let's create a duplicate of this one, and then let's seal the top part and then use it just as the effector, right? So I'll hit on slash to bring everything back. Make sure my glass is selected, and then we can do Shift D to create a duplicate. And then if you come here, you can see we have bottle 1 and then bottle 2, which is the duplicate. So let's just double click on it, and then let's rename it to effector, like this, right? So now we have our domain, we have effector, and then we have our flow, right? So let's make sure we have the effector selected. Let's hit on slash to isolate it, and then let's fill this part up. Let's close this hole up, right? So let's tab into edit mode. Make sure we have our face select mode active. Alt click to select this loop here, hit on X, and then we delete the faces. So now we have 2 separate faces inside. So select the inner part and then hit on L to select the linked part, and then we can hit on X and then delete faces. So we've deleted the inner part, right? So once we have that, next let's fill this up. So let's go to our edge mode, alt click to select this entire edge, E to extrude, and then S to scale it down, ES to scale it down, then hit on F to fill this up. So once we are done, you can hit on tab and then slash to go back out of edit mode. So in our effector, we are going to check this so that it doesn't render for now, and then we can uncheck this as well, but let's leave it intact for now. And then let's make sure we have this checked so that it doesn't render in our final render. So once we have these 3 things set up, now let's see how we can create our fluid simulation. It's going to be a little bit complicated, but I'll try as much as possible to explain everything to the best of my understanding. So first, let's start with our effector. That's the less difficult one, less confusing one. So with our effector selected, let's go to our physics properties, and then let's check fluid type. We set it to effector like this. That's it. We are not going to do anything, and then we are done with our effector. Next, let's go to our domain, and then let's select our fluid again. So in our physics properties, we select fluid to be applied to our domain. Then type, we set it to domain. It's going to give us a bunch of settings. What are we creating? We are creating liquid. So let's change the domain type from gas to liquid, right? So once we do that, it's going to change the viewport settings back to solid again. So let's change it back to bounce again. Then let's go back to our properties, and then this is what we have. So what the domain does is Blender is going to use the space inside the domain to calculate where our fluid simulation appears. So instead of creating fluid all over our workspace, Blender is just going to calculate the fluid which is inside the domain. So everything outside the domain will not show. So everything will be contained. So just imagine the domain as a little container that is going to contain all our fluid simulation. So this helps to free up memory and then save us space, and then make our simulation a little bit faster. So now let's look at the settings in our domain. So inside our domain, the resolution, the higher the resolution, the more finer your fluid is, and then the longer it will take for your PC to generate the simulation. So try to keep it as slow as possible, or as high as possible, depending on the machine you're using. So I'm going to set mine to 64 for now. We'll come back to it later. So next, let's leave everything as is. Now let's go to border collision. We don't want the fluid to collide with anything, so let's just untick everything from it like this. And then next, we're going to leave this everything as is. We're going to leave everything as is. Since this is a beginner friendly tutorial, you can feel free to play along with it, but then let's leave everything as is for now. And then let's go down to our field weights. And then field weight, we don't want gravity to affect the fluid that we're going to create, so let's set our gravity to 0 like this. Right, so once we have this, maybe the cache, let's look at the cache. So we want it to start at frame 1 and then end at, let's say, frame 70 to save a little bit of space. We just need one frame for the, as a matter of fact, we are not going to do animation, we are just doing a render, a still render, so we just need a frame. So I think if we set the head to frame 70, that will be fine for us. And then type, let's just change it to modular, and then let's make it resumable. So if we change it to modular, once this starts to generate, it's not going to calculate everything. It will calculate the smallest fluid, and then it will keep calculating the fluid as it gets up. So the domain will start small and then it will keep on increasing, just to save space and memory. It's a little bit more fast. So let's leave it at modular, and then let's leave it as resumable, so that we can pause our simulation at any time and then check it out. So that's it for the domain. We'll come back to it later. Next, let's focus on our effector, our flow. So let's select the plane, go to fluid, and then let's make sure we have it set to flow. Right, flow type, let's change it to liquid, and then let's increase the sample to, let's say, 5, and then flow source, let's change it to 5 as well. And then let's check here for the initial velocity. Source, let's leave it to 1, then maybe normal, so let's set it to 100. Right, and then now we want the flow to come to the side. Right, we want it to flow on this side, so on the positive side. So let's increase the x on the x positive side. So let's increase the positive x to, let's say, something like this. Right, so that it flows this side. So if your flow is somewhere here, maybe you should increase the y or the x-axis, depending on where the plane is facing. So it's facing this side, so we're going to increase the x on the positive side. If it were to be here, we're going to increase it on the negative side. I hope that makes sense. So once we have everything set up, let's go to our domain once again, and then let's hit on big data. So let's make sure we have our physics properties active, and then let's big data to see what we have. So I'm going to click on my big data, and then to take a little bit to bake the data, and then we see what we have. So it's baking here, it's almost done. We are at 50%. Yeah, it will be done very shortly. Yeah, so once we bake the data, this is what we have. So first, let's change this to our timeline, and then let's make sure we set the end to 70. Now let's hit on play to see how our fluid simulation is looking. So I'll hit on play, then this is what we have. Right, you can see. Right, so if you're happy with the results, then you can continue, or yes, still you can play along with the settings, maybe bring this a little bit down. So let's go back, let's select this, and then let's free the data, and then maybe we can select this GZ to bring it a little bit down, maybe bring it a little bit closer on the x-axis like this. So we bring it a little bit closer, and I think this should work for us. So once we are sure that this will work, let's select the domain, and then I'm going to increase my final simulation to, let's say, 164. You can increase it to anything you want, just as I said, based on what your PC will be able to handle. So I'll do 160, and you see the little box here goes smaller, which means there's a lot more resolution for Blender to calculate, which will take a lot more time to process. So once I'm happy with it, I will just click on bake data to bake my data. So this will be the final data I'm going to use. So you see how slow it is. All this while is now at 1%. So I'm going to speed this up, and then we will be back once this is done. So once it's done, this is what we have. It took me about 5 minutes to complete with the resolution set to 160. So let me hit on play to see what we have. You see, it's a little bit more refined and more detailed. I think it's looking good. We can continue. So once we have our simulation done, next thing we have to do is let's turn this into a mesh. So let's go back to our physics simulations tab. Let's go to our mesh, and then once we have our mesh out like this, let's hit on bake mesh to bake this thing into a mesh. So I'll just click on bake mesh, and then it will start baking my simulation into a solid mesh. So let's give it a little bit of time for it to finish, and then we can continue on with our video. So once our mesh is done baking, we can see what we have. So let's go back. Let's make sure we have the domain still selected. And let's go back to our our object properties, and let's change this from bound to solid, right? And then voila, this is what we have. So now we can go back and then play through to see how we created our nice splash simulation milk type effect, right? So I can scroll through until I find a keyframe or a position that works for me, and then maybe we can just, if you want to create an animation, go ahead to do it, but I just need one frame for our final render. So at this point, let's do Ctrl+S to make sure we have our progress saved, and then let's add in our light and then our backdrop, and then render our final image. So once we have at this particular frame, I think this looks nice enough. I'm just going to go ahead to apply my simulation to bake it inside to make it into a single frame. So to do that, with the domain selected, let's go to our modifiers tab. Let's select this, apply, and then apply this as well. So now it's just a single frame like this, right? I think it's looking nice for me. So now let's quickly set up our final scene. So first I'll drag here. I'll drag to the side to create another window like this. And I'm going to hit on my camera to toggle the camera view. Maybe bring it a little bit up like this. And then let's lock it in place so that we'll be able to rotate our object freely in our scene like this. Nice and simple. So next, let's add in a backdrop right somewhere here. So let's do Shift+A, mesh, add in a plane, G, and then let's position it to somewhere here, R, Y, 90, and then let's scale it out. Let's scale it out, and then G, and then let's bring it forward to somewhere here like this. Nice and simple. So next, let's set this to our render view so that we see what we have. All right, it's looking nice. So let's select this plane. Maybe let's drag this, unlock it. Let's scroll our mouse wheel to somewhere here, and let's lock it again. And let's change this to our shader editor. Then let's select this plane, and then let's add in a color. All right, so you can give it any color that you want. Go for a little bit darker blue, just to be able to separate our milk from our object, from the main object like this, right? It's a darker color, nice like this. Please, at this point, feel free to play with it. The creativity is totally in your hands. Feel free to do whatever you want with it. So maybe let's make this a little bit lighter, like this color here. So let's use our color picker, and then let's pick from this color right here, right? So next we can add in our own light if we want, or we can use the HDRI for render if you want. It's all up to you. So to add in your own light, maybe you go to our world, then maybe decrease the strength of our HDRI to something like this, just to get some real reflections here and there. So I'll just click here, maybe change my HDRI. No, this is not good. Let's play with it till I find a perfect HDRI for me. So play with it, find, I think this works for me. So once I have this, let me add in my own light. So to add in your own light, Shift A, go to your light, and then let's add in an area light, right? So G, then let's position it somewhere here. Let's rotate it on the X-axis to 90 degrees. Then let's make this very big like this. Then we can increase the power. So power, we can set it to, let's say 1000 to see what we have. We can maybe make it thinner like this, send it a little bit back, and then maybe bring it forward, then R to rotate it on the Z axis somewhere here. Now we have this nice light. Maybe we can increase the power to 2000 to see what we have. So we have this nice light with reflection here. We can add in another light here, Shift D, duplicate, bring it to this side, rotate it on the Z axis, position it somewhere here, then maybe decrease this power to 1000 so that we have another nice light reflection at this point. And then maybe we can create a duplicate, bring it somewhere here at the bottom, let it face our objects like this for a little bit of reflection at the bottom here. Let's decrease the power to, let's say 100 like this, right? So just play with the lighting and everything until you find something that really works for you. G, everything is right in your hands. Maybe I can bring another light right at the back, then bring it like this, just to light the back scene a little bit to make everything look nice and beautiful. So once you are done and you're happy with your color, let's hide this so that we see what we have. I think one final thing, let's give our milk. So select your milk and then let's give it its own material. So let's go to the object, new, make sure this is set to pure white like this, and then let's add in some subdivision surface. So subsurface scattering, so let's add in a little bit, and then let's add in a little bit of transmission like this, right? And then let's rename this material to milk material. So next, let's select this one, and then let's go to our materials, and then let's select our newly created milk material, and then let's apply it. I think this makes it look a little bit realistic, right? So just feel free to play with it till you find what works best for you. You can play with your camera, maybe rotate your camera a bit, RZ, RX to rotate your camera. Maybe you want a little bit of angle. Play with it until you find something that works for you. It's all up to you. I'm going to leave it up here. I hope you get the concept, you get the style and everything. Once you are happy and done with it, you can go to our render properties, go to our color management, and then maybe change the look to medium high contrast or maybe a high contrast. Just play with it until you find what works best for you. Then once you're done, we can select this and then give it a subdivision surface, add a subdivision surface of 1 to it to make it even more smoother. It's going to slow up my PC a little bit, but I'll give it a little bit of time, and then it's going to add the subdivision surface to make it look a little bit better. So once your subdivision is applied, it took me a little bit of time, which means my machine is struggling at this point. Just right click and then let's shade it smooth to make sure we have the shade smooth applied, so we have it looking very nice and beautiful. Once we're done, you can go to our render, maybe decrease our render sample to 100 for now. You can go to 1000 or something, but I'll do 100 for now. Render, and then I'll render my final image. So there's my final render. I hope it's looking nice and beautiful. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe. A lot more is on their way coming. See you on the next one. It's my friend, and peace out, my friend.